And we are live with Curtis in New Mexico for episode 78 of the Next Report Unix and Overlooked Pop Culture. Um, how's the weather where you're at?
It is sunny, 86 degrees, and very windy.
It was actually windy late last night, and I live upstairs, and where I live upstairs, it's kind of warmer due to heat rising and all of that, but I can feel the temperature dropping a little bit. And we were going to talk about certain fun things today, but this is just as fun and just as important, actually. Um, that time of the year has come for tornado season, and you are very fortunate. You do not live in Tornado Alley. I live right smack in the center of Tornado
Well,
Alley.
I'm from Tornado Alley, and to be honest, I like Tornado Alley because I like storms. My dad used to be a volunteer firefighter for the Holden Police Department or Fire Department a long time ago when I was a little kid, and so I had been out chasing storms many, many times in my life with him in the fire department before. So I like this stuff, but
It can be very, very dangerous,
yes.
um, and you actually put together quite a bit of information
Mhm.
for today's broadcast. Some resources that you can go to kind of have more information and what have you. And tell us about the Prediction Center in Norman, Oklahoma.
So
Uh,
okay. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
um, Basically, kind of what their big thing is, what they're known for.
Okay. So the Storm Predictions Laboratory is part of the National Weather Service, and it's located in Norman, Oklahoma. And basically, what they do is they produce every day of the year, the weather prediction for the next 72 hours for the entirety of the United States. And the reason that I put them as the first link is because anybody who does storm chasing, any new like your local Fox 4 or CBS 9 or whatever local news channels you have in whatever town you live in, is going to get the majority of their information about severe weather or just weather in general from the Storm Prediction Center and from the National Weather Service. Um, there are other places out there, like there's weather.com, there's Weather Underground, Unisys. I think Unisys is Canadian, and they do a North American forecast for the whole continent. But these places are just as good. They also share information between the Weather Service. But it is the Weather Service's job to go after severe storms in particular. And given that we've now entered tornado season, which, by the way, New Mexico is actually in Tornado Alley.
Oh, my bad.
Yep, up to the Rio Grande River is technically considered. We get about 3 a year. We don't see, anything near what is seen in Kansas, Oklahoma, and Nebraska, and Iowa, of course. But it's it can be fun.
Because
But
I was looking at one of the animated patterns, and it looked like, basically where you were at, you were away from most of the danger, and
yeah,
mostly.
yeah, no, it's just like I said, it's really hot here. We have a low pressure system that's developing over the state of New Mexico, actually, that's going to bring you guys rain over the weekend. And that's one of the reasons why it's so windy here, because the low is building, and air masses from high pressures flow into the low area pressure. So if you get a lot of really highly charged air that's got a lot of moisture and a lot of energy flowing into a low, you get the development of a low pressure system, and then eventually cold fronts or warm fronts, which brings you the rain and the severe weather.
So, so you've been watching this watching some stuff developing,
Uh-huh.
and you say that there's something developing towards the end of Missouri, around the Joplin area, Kansas area.
Yeah, so about half an hour, well, about 45 minutes ago, I've been following a live stream, and there's, I guess if you want to segue really quickly into our next topic, because these are technically resources, there's a YouTube channel called Storm Chasing Video, and it's all one word. And they do live streams of tornado chasers, storm chasers from all over the country. And they have two running right now. A couple of well-known guys, Brandon Ivy, who I believe works for the Weather Channel, and Ben McMillan, who's a amateur. He doesn't work for anybody. He does this for his hobby, basically. And they're both chasing in southeastern Kansas, right above Coffeyville, Kansas, close to Joplin, Missouri, in a town called Parsons. And they have a wall cloud on the ground, or they have a wall cloud, excuse me. I don't know if there's a tornado on the ground, but I'm looking at the radar, and the relative velocity on the storm is just insane. There's definitely really strong rotation in the storm, so people in that area are definitely going to have a lot of, at least at the very least, they're going to have a lot of hail, a lot of very big hail, golf ball size or bigger probably.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, and it looks like two more cells have developed in front of it, and just now passing south of Nevada, Missouri, north of Joplin. So, you might actually be able to see these if you were to be able to look south from Warrensburg. You might see the very tops of the clouds, although I don't know. On the live stream, it's getting dark there for you guys. We still have about an hour of daylight left here in central New Mexico. So the live stream is getting harder and harder to see what's going on.
I do notice some clouds looking in that top window in the loft that I live in. So it is I'm trying. I don't notice any wind at the moment. I don't see any branches moving back and forth harshly, but
yeah, there's I think because we're talking about a storm that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 counties away from you, so probably 300 miles or more. So I don't know. I mean, there's nothing developing back in east central Kansas at this time, so I don't know that you guys will actually get anything tonight. But this event is actually interesting because there was literally nothing here 45 minutes ago, and this thing just exploded. I mean, it's just a massive cell.
There's some other places to go as well. There's Pecos Hank's channel. Yeah. There's also TIV, which is Tornado Intercept Video. Those are some other places that you can go to.
So I mislabeled the Tornado Intercept Video. That was actually not supposed to be there. That's a link for a special vehicle that I thought we could talk about later. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry about that.
No, that's okay. I just mislabeled it. But yeah, there is Pecos Hank's channel.
And he has a website as well, pecoshank.com. So, and I'm assuming this guy is very, very experienced at what he does.
Well, he's an amateur. I believe he has a degree in biology from Texas A&M, I believe, or maybe it's the University of Houston. But anyway, he does chase storms. He plays in a band. He's really got a really, really interesting YouTube channel, and I wanted to give him a shout out because his video quality and his production, he puts a lot of work into it, and he really, in my opinion, is undersubscribed. So, hopefully some of the watchers of this podcast might go check him out, and if you agree that you like his content, give him that subscribe. He's got some really great tornado and lightning videos. He's got his own band, so he's got some great music videos on there, and some interesting wildlife videos too, stuff with snakes and so on.
Well, since you mislabeled Link, tell us about this type of vehicle.
So there's basically there's a film director. His name is Sean Casey, and he works for IMAX, I believe. And so he had this idea of wanting to shoot IMAX film of tornadoes either extremely close to them or actually inside of them. So they designed a vehicle that was designed to be able to be anchored down, so you could drive it into position. You could anchor. It's very heavy. It's actually got armor. It almost looks like a tank, and it's got
Yeah,
yeah, it's got windows. It's got a rotating two IMAX camera places, lots of stuff on it, and the people inside can actually lay down in the bottom of it. There's actually like a sub window below the windshield, so they can get as low to the ground and to keep themselves safe. There are two of these vehicles. There was TIV-1 and TIV-2, and the really cool thing is that on the 27th of May of 2013, they actually survived being inside of an EF4 tornado. It did rip the door off, so they spent about half of the. I think they were in the tornado for about 7 minutes. Very slow-moving storm. It ripped the door off, and they actually were exposed through debris inside the truck. They're very lucky they didn't get killed. But the video from that, I didn't link to it, but it's all over YouTube. If you just tornado intercept vehicle, you'll find the video, and it's really incredible. I can't even believe what it must have been like or felt like to be there.
And that's just one of the tools that they've been using to kind of track
Yes.
and all of that. And how do people measure the damage that a tornado does?
Okay, so it's important to talk about that because when people who are really not weather junkies like I am, or who may not know a lot about it, that you probably hear your local weatherman say it's an EF2 or it's an EF5, and you're probably thinking, what does that mean? So what they're talking about is they're talking about the Fujita scale, and Ted Fujita was a physicist, and in the 1970s, late 1970s, working at the University of Chicago, he developed basically a scale that could be used to determine a category for a tornado that was based basically upon the damage that it causes and the wind speed. And so, because there are a lot of correlations between these two things. And so the original scale was called the Fujita scale, and it was numbered from 0 to 5. And just to give you a little bit of a basic description of it, an F2 tornado, Fujita scale 2 tornado, would be having its fastest sustained winds would be about 113 to 150 miles an hour. And so that means the tornadoes that's the straight line wind. If you were standing in there, that's what you would be measuring. And, it would be pretty damaging. This would probably flip over some cars or at least move them along the roadway. It could damage trailers and that sort of thing. Whereas an EF5 is what they commonly call the thumb of God. And this is a tornado, if you're familiar with the film that came out in 1994 called Twister. This is the one they chase in the end. They are bases that are over a mile wide with winds that are in excess of 250 miles per hour. And their total destruction, Greensburg, Kansas, 2007, which was destroyed. The whole town was utterly destroyed by an EF5 tornado. There have only been about 60 recorded EF5s. I'm sure there have been many more, but because we only have had a scale for really trying to determine how big tornadoes were for the last 30-some years, 40-some years, there's no way to tell about any of the storms that happened in the 1800s or the early 1900s. Guesses have been made, like for the Tri-State tornado, for example, which was in 1925 that affected Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana.
So So basically, the bigger the number, the more damage it's going to be doing.
Right.
Basically,
Right. That is absolutely true. And there is. I'm trying to remember. Oh, it was when this was actually done, but yeah, 2007. After um, some tornadoes that happened in the early 2000s, they actually got together and using some of the new science that has been done, they revised the original scale. It's now called the Enhanced Fujita scale. So now instead of F5, you'll hear EF5. And it's not really a huge deal, but they did some things where they made much better accuracy on figuring out wind speed and damage and the kind of the lines between what would be an EF4 and an EF5. So it's kind of an update.
and I'm looking at these, like in EF5, for example, can damage an apartment, condo, townhouses, etc. An EF8 can damage a small retail building, like fast food. The tornado in Joplin practically took out an entire Walmart, basically.
Yes.
So it was probably bigger than that. So far, there's been a couple of unusual things this year. I see an EF4, an EF3, and an EF4 in Nebraska. So,
right. So it was last year in May and June. There were a couple of incredible, what they call photogenic tornadoes. That means they happen in the early afternoon when there's plenty of daylight, and you can get really good pictures, really good video of these storms. And the most famous one are the twins, the Pilger, Nebraska twins, which I believe was June 17th of last year. And you had one single storm was dropping two completely distinct and non-related tornadoes, both of them in EF4 category, one of which actually took a direct hit on the town of Pilger. There were a couple of people killed. There were a lot of injuries, a lot of damage. And the video, which I have here, and I'm sure we can figure out a way to link a lot of this stuff in the show notes. The video is just mind-boggling. The Coleridge tornado, there's debate as to whether or not it was an EF3, an EF4, or an EF5. There wasn't a ton of damage because it mostly happened outside of town and didn't hit any other major towns in the area. But the video from that is also incredible. Some of the chasers, Pecos Hank was one of them, actually got very, very close to the storm and was able to do so because it was moving a lot slower than they normally do.
So 2014, last year.
Yeah.
Last year, basically. Yeah. Why did I say this year? That's
right.
But very unusual year for tornadoes.
There were other instances too that are out there that people can go and research and look at.
2013, Oklahoma had one, an EF5. There was also Greensburg, Kansas. In 2007, it was apparently destroyed the whole town. I think you mentioned that earlier. The Tri-State one, back in 1925 was the deadliest one, but Joplin in 2011, there's a debate between EF4 and EF5, but it did a lot of damage nonetheless.
That's true. So the El Reno, Oklahoma tornado is the largest one we've recorded. At the height, when the storm was at its most powerful, the base of the tornado was twice as big as any they had ever seen on camera before. it was 2.5 mile wide tornado on the ground, meaning that inside the actual rotation vortex was a 2.5 mile tract of land. So you can imagine that this thing was absolutely massive, and it did considerable damage just north of Oklahoma City. I believe El Reno is a suburb of Oklahoma City, if memory serves correctly.
So, and that wasn't very far from Midwest City then, because that's also a suburb.
That's right. Yeah. This storm went through El Reno, Yukon, and Piedmont before it finally died out in the country south of Guthrie. And of course, people will remember last year, I believe it was. No, it was the same year. It was 2013. Actually, that's right. It was. El Reno was 2 weeks after the Moore, Oklahoma tornado, which was very devastating and killed several children in a school, and I think there were at least 70 people that were killed and several hundred hurt. And it was an EF4, EF5 also, very dangerous storm that went south of Oklahoma City.
So there are those who know what they're doing when they're chasing it, whether they're paid professionally or they just do it because they enjoy it. But these things can be very, very devastating.
Yeah, that's right.
Like, again, I remember the news about the Joplin tornado, and it did a significant amount of damage. A lot of people got hurt, and it wasn't very pleasant. Basically, you've heard things in school going, this is what you need to do to prepare for a tornado, things like that. And any emergency situation, it's a good idea. Anyway, having a plan, purchasing an NOAA weather radio,
right,
and knowing when the season begins and ends in your area as well. And it's now starting, at least for where I'm at, and even where you're at.
Yeah.
It's now April. It's time. In terms of planning, what is your recommended course of action in addition to getting that type of radio that can keep people up to date on the weather?
Well, so if you live in Tornado Alley, so if you're living in Missouri, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, northern Texas, Arkansas, Iowa, South Dakota to some degree, then the best plan that you can have is to, if you live in like a trailer park, for example, try to remember you have friends that are close by. If there's a tornado coming for your town, can you get to their house if they have a house, if they have a shelter? Because the only place that's less safe to be in a tornado than a trailer is a car. So a trailer's kind of unfortunately at the bottom of the list of safest places to be. And even a house without a basement will be much better because it's on a built, sturdy foundation. So
the only exception to that is if said trailer happens to be down inside of down a valley, down a really, really steep hill.
Well, I mean, you've got that. That's true, but the tornado can definitely track right down that valley, and in some ways, if it's a very narrow valley, then the winds will actually be worse, and it could go over. Yeah, it's just the best plan I would say is that if you're a person who lives in any kind of mobile home or mobile trailer, try to make connections with somebody who has a stable structure, or at the very least, if there's like a work garage or a school nearby that you can go to in the event of an emergency. Get with them and find out if there's somebody that's going to be there, all hours of the day or night. A lot of high schools have night janitors. Ours did in Holden when I was a kid. So, those are places to go. The reason I say consider purchasing the radio is because the radio is, I think, $20 at Walmart. They're very high quality. I have one. I've had it for like 10 years. I've never had to worry about it breaking. I think I've dropped it hundreds of times. But the great thing is that if you live in an area where there's not a lot of like television access, or if you don't even watch TV, a lot of people have migrated to the internet these days and do Netflix and things like that. This is the best thing you can do because you can set the radio to your specific town. And so if there is any kind of a warning, whether it's winter storm or tornado or severe thunderstorm or flooding or whatever, it will only go off when it's affecting your town, the area you live in. So it's a great thing to have. And because the broadcasting towers are so interspersed, it still works during a thunderstorm or a tornado. When you're in your basement and you're out of power, you can plug the batteries in and you've still got information that you can get to. With that being said, the internet can also be used for this now today too. You can actually stream NOAA weather radio over the internet. So if you've got a laptop, for example, and a cell phone Wi-Fi hotspot type deal, then you could stay in connection too.
And there's some obvious myths and that can wind up hurting people too. Things such as window pressure, big city, mountain tornadoes, which you kind of sort of touched upon that. Freeway hiding and outrunning a storm.
So, yeah, there's, a lot of times, and I've seen it in television, and I've seen it in movies even. So a popular myth is that if there's a tornadic storm that's coming anywhere near you, that you should open all the windows in your house because that will keep too much pressure from building up in the house. And people used to think that the pressure would build up and that would actually blow out the house, blow your walls down. And it's just not. There's no truth to it at all. I mean, the amount of pressure that would have to build to tear your house apart from the inside is far more than you would even see inside of a hurricane, which is way more powerful than a tornado. So, that's one that I've seen a lot, especially in older television series, from the 90s, 80s.
But do stay away from your windows, though.
Yes. Definitely don't get near your windows. Don't get in front of any kind of glass sliding doors, because they're either going to get blown in or they're going to get hit by debris, and then you're going to have glass in your face, and that's never fun.
So yeah, this often the center of the structure, away from anything that can break, basement level or as low as possible. It's the best one. Now, big cities. What's the big myth about big cities?
Well, there are a lot of. It was another one of those kind of urban myths. Is people said, well, tornadoes can't strike big cities. So, for example, you'll never see a tornado in downtown Kansas City or downtown Tulsa, except it's not true at all. There was a tornado that went straight through the middle of downtown Oklahoma City in 1991. There have been that have gone straight through Lincoln, Nebraska, through Des Moines, Iowa. So just because you have skyscrapers and a big spread out city doesn't mean that the winds are going to get deflected, which is what people thought would happen. Maybe it'll deflect the winds and the tornado won't form, but it's not true at all.
There's also the whole mountain tornadoes.
So people thought that tornadoes couldn't form in mountains, although it's also not true. There have been multiple hikers and campers who have seen tornadoes above 10,000 feet. One of the most popular, there's a photograph out on the internet the guy took in the early 80s of one in northern Utah, and he was on a mountaintop at 10,500 feet, I believe. So just because you're on top of a mountain doesn't mean you're safe from vortices.
But there's also, I don't know why people think they could hide in the freeway under a bridge.
Yeah, so this is another one of those popular myths, and a lot of these I don't know where they came from. I actually tried to research them and see if I could figure out, when did people start believing in big numbers that, if you're caught on the road during a tornado, that you should get under a freeway overpass. And I mean, I can't find the earliest references to it, but at least since the 70s, this has been a big thing in movies and film and TV that it's a concrete structure, so get under. The problem is that most freeway overpasses are very open underneath, and you're just going to get sucked out the other side. It would actually be better to stay in your car at that point, because at least if you are buckled into your car and your car gets swept up and rolled, you have a chance of surviving, because it's not your body that's getting rolled around on the rocks and so on.
Hell, it's better to go jump in a ditch than it is to jump under a freeway.
Exactly.
And of course, there are those who foolishly try to outrun one of these things.
Right. So, tornadic storms have been clocked as high as 90 miles an hour in movement before. There's no reason to think that that's a limit either. I'm sure that if a storm had enough energy that it could go faster than that. So generally the safest place to be on a storm is on the backside of the storm. And in Tornado Alley, storms generally come from the west and go east. Now they might come northeast and go, or from the northwest and go southeast, or they might come from the southwest going northeast, or just generally east. They can take any path, but you're never going to see a tornado form in the west and move due west. They just don't work that way. That's not how the dynamics of the atmosphere work. And so if you're behind the storm, this is the safest place to be. Now, that's not 100% true either, because a storm can actually circle around itself. And so if it's not technically moving, west, but it's circling around itself and coming right back to where it started, that kind of is moving west in a way. And so you've really got to be careful. If you're a person that's chasing storms, and I would say if you don't have any experience, don't do it, because we don't want you to die. We want you to keep listening to the podcast.
Right.
It really does take a lot of planning and a lot of information, knowing a lot of the terms of what you're seeing, because there are identifiers that storm chasers use visually to know that that storm is actually taking like what they would call a hard left turn or a hard right turn. And it's happened before where chasers were driving alongside a tornado 4 miles away from them, parallel, and the storm makes a hard right turn, and they get hit in the middle of it and get killed. A couple of years ago, it was either 2013 or 2014, there was a Weather Channel veteran storm chaser and his son were both killed because they got sideswiped when a tornado just went off its deviated track. And so it's definitely a very, very dangerous, but also at the same time important job for spotters to be out there to give visual representation.
So in other words, be very, very careful when you're doing that sort of stuff. Know what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah.
But yeah, some of these things, some of the myths kind of boggled my mind. I'm like, why do people try to hide under a freeway? Because frankly, if something is that powerful enough and you're not low enough towards the ground, in theory it could damage the structure enough to where it actually would cave in on you. So,
well, like, we talked about Greensburg, Kansas earlier, which has kind of been the go-to discussion because Joplin had it. It was a cakewalk in Joplin compared to what Greensburg went through. The EF5 that hit Greensburg in 2007 hit during the nighttime when most people were asleep. Even people that were in their basements. The tornado was over a mile wide in estimate. There's not a lot of footage of that storm because it was, I think it was 11 p.m. when it hit. so it's very hard to get video at that time of night. But even people that hid in their basements ended up getting killed. The storm completely leveled the town. It was a direct hit on the town. It destroyed 95% of the town, and I was going to find some of the other statistics about it, because it was just, there were people who did all the right things about where they were supposed to go in their houses, and it did not save them. Even there were even some reports of basements actually being pulled out of the ground. Farmland where there were rows and rows of corn, the soil was showing because the grass had been ripped out of the ground. So, you know, if the tornado's big and mean enough, even doing all the right things is probably not going to help you.
But it can minimize.
It can. It can. Let's see, that night that it happened was the, let's see here, I was looking for it. 95% of the city was confirmed to be destroyed, and the other 5% was listed as being severely damaged. The estimate of wind speed was 330 kilometers per hour, or about 205 miles per hour. And it was the first tornado to be rated EF5 since they enhanced the Fujita scale 4 months earlier. And I mean, it was just insane. It was declared a disaster area. There were over 700 people were hurt, and estimates vary between 30 and 35 people were killed, although there are people that went missing. That one gentleman was found, I think, 7 miles away in a field because it had tossed him that far, which is not, I imagine, a fun way to go.
Oh man.
Yeah.
So yeah, like my mom is one of those that likes watching tornadoes. Is as strange as it sounds, and there are lots of other people who do too. But yeah, it's kind of the start of that season, and basically our way of saying, hey, you know, be on the lookout and be careful.
Yeah,
and
just advising listeners to keep in mind Weather Underground, weather.com, the National Weather Service.gov website. These are all great places to get information. They're totally free. You don't have to do any kind of subscriptions or sign up to use it, or anything like that. You know, and then just keeping your eyes on the sky during this time of the year, because a lot of tornado deaths can be prevented if people pay attention to the warnings and, you know, take shelter when you're advised. Which used to be a big problem because of the way that the original warning system, which has been changed in the last decade, the way it originally worked was very difficult and very bulky.
And nowadays you have most of your towns and cities are going to have kind of an alarm going off that blares an annoying sound, but it's tested monthly.
Yeah, and you know, if you want to take a couple of minutes to talk about the warning system and what I was alluding to, it used to be, you know, when we were kids, because you and I are not that far apart in age. I think we're just a couple of years. I'm a couple of years younger than you, I think, Tommy. So we're right there. When we were kids, and you probably remember this, you know, during tornado season, if there was a tornado, they'd say on the TV or on the radio, there's a tornado warning for Johnson County, Missouri, let's say. And that warning was for the whole county. So if the tornado was actually 2 miles south of Warrensburg, moving east-northeast at 35 miles an hour, which the warning would tell you the direction it's moving, why would a person in Holden or Kingsville, that's, you know, 30 miles west of Warrensburg, need to take cover? To them, the sky's sunny and the storm is moving away from them, on the east side. And so what this led to is the problem where and the original warning, when the county was warned, every town in that county would set off their tornado sirens. So what would happen is, my dad would poke his head out the door and it's, it's that storm that's moving away from us, that's no threat to us at all, and you go back to doing whatever you were doing. The problem is that, the more this happens, the more people become accustomed to it happening. And then people started to ignore the warnings, and then when there really was a warning for your area, and you didn't know it, you just heard the siren, you think, oh, it's whatever, I'm just going to go back, then that's when people got hurt. As radar and the satellite technology got better and better throughout the 1990s and the early 2000s, high-definition video and high-definition radar and telemetry actually made it easier to create new warning systems, to where now today in 2015 they can actually tell you right where the center of rotation is in the storm, and then they can warn only the area that storm is going to affect. So back to our example of if we have a tornado 2 miles southwest of Warrensburg and it's heading northeast at 30 miles an hour, then they'll put a cone that includes Warrensburg in the path, and they'll give the warning, the tornado warning, and then only Warrensburg and any city that's in that cone will sound off their sirens. That way you don't have, Sedalia or somewhere that's 50 miles away and not in the area. So that's actually made things a lot better. It's also made it easier to get law enforcement organized so that they can get out and get the word out and try to make sure people are safe and do spotting. Because you don't have to go, oh, wait, I need to go out on watch. Oh, wait, that tornado is 40 miles away from me and I don't have anything to do with it. So the warning system has gotten a lot better.
Yeah, I grew up outside, a mile outside of Leeton, so I didn't hear alarms as much per se, and lived down a good-sized hill too. Mm-hmm. So going to the basement, I would have been especially safe.
Yeah.
But there's plenty of information out there. I personally go to Weather Underground because they will go off of the things that are closest to where you're at. But I don't remember if the Weather Channel actually bought them out or not.
I don't know if they did.
But Weather Channel is also the weather.com from the Weather Channel is good too. So.
Yeah, the Weather Channel's. I would say out of all three, the Weather Channel is the one that I don't like the most. But that's mainly because their website sometimes is so weird in its design that sometimes I'm looking for something specific. Different people who are interested in weather have different levels of knowledge. I have a science education background in college, so oftentimes I want to know things like what the CAPE level is, which is a part of physics about the atmospheric conditions for that particular day, or I want to know what the wind velocity is, or what the storm relative motion is. And that's not something that the average person who just wants to know about the storm is going to want to know. And so with weather.com, it's hard to find the information because they've got it buried in so many different places. Weather Underground does a much better job of that. Unisys does a great job, and then I would say the National Weather Service, their radar or their website's very primitive in terms of design. It's not flashy with lots of big buttons and so on, but it works very well and it's very well laid out. And so that's one of the reasons I've used it so much. Plus, they have the radar network that I can link every radar in the continental U.S. and see it in the big picture. But again, that I think it depends. And so if you're kind of the average person who maybe has a slight interest, or maybe you just want to know where to go to get information, Wonderground would be my first choice to you. Weather Channel would be my second. National Weather Service would be like a tied second. And then Unisys, which we talked about, honestly, it's probably going to be for the person who wants the science data. They, like I was talking, relative motions and things. They're going to have a lot more hard satellite imagery and so on that somebody who's interested in tracking storms would want to look at.
Well, I think that's been a very good episode, and it's barely after 8, and yet it's already dark. So I'm probably Warrensburg's probably going to be getting something very shortly. So at least rain, I'm thinking, because I'm like, wow.
You got a little bit of spotty rain on the radar, but nothing big yet. The closest stuff to you that might give you a little rain is just getting into Johnson County from Cass County, and it's just a little bit of spotty rain. There are 4 tornado warnings now for the cell near Joplin. It looks like Joplin is under the gun. So if anybody's watching this live from Joplin, you might want to take cover.
Oh my. And with that, I think we better end this particular episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Entertain yourself, educate yourself, empower yourself. Our website is thenixtreport.com, where you can follow most of our social networking presence on the left-hand side. We're also on Tumblr. And yes, I still love copy. Did you see that?
I didn't see that.
Okay. On Tumblr, they had their April Fool's prank be, their Executive Suite Productivity Edition, which productivity on Tumblr is an oxymoron. Tumblr,
yeah, I was about to say.
Tumblr, a lot of filled with, let's just say, interesting people, annoying people at times, but interesting people, and they waste a lot of time there. But it was a throwback to the 90s with the little animated copy machine.
Oh, right.
Microsoft's Clippy has nothing on this guy. An emotional assistant that's like, I haven't been very much help to you. What? Data? That's my favorite. And you ask it why, and it just, I don't know. it was weird and funny, but I nevertheless enjoyed that prank. But I love copy. Bring them back, please. And we'll talk to you next week.
Have a good one.